It's kind of that thing that Wayne Gretzky said. You don't skate to where the puck is, you skate to where the puck is going.
Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories.
So here's my story. As I've mentioned before, my oldest son, David, is an Eagle Scout, and he is now in his senior year at the University of Colorado. And as a summer job, he went back to Philmont, which is one of 4 high adventure Boy Scout camps in the country. And he's a backcountry ranger. So he's off-grid, hiking over the mountains and mesas of the northern New Mexico desert. And he's having the time of his life. He loves that. I don't know how. It's like 115 degrees out there. He just loves this. So he'll call when he has reception back at base camp. And for one of these calls, he was unnaturally pensive, because normally he's really enthusiastic, and that's part of his job, to be enthusiastic for his crew, but also that's kind of the culture over at Philmont. And he was basically asking me, do you think I'm wasting my time? I mean, I love it here, but I'm graduating with a degree in mixed media and animation and graphic design. You know, that's what I'm probably going to be able to do in order to make a living. And Philmont has nothing to do with that. And, you know, what do you think? So he was a little bit down. I think maybe he ran into somebody, as you do, or saw somebody on social media who said, you know, I started my second country in Western Europe, and I cured cancer, and I've done this.
And I started a nonprofit.
Started a nonprofit, and I've, you know, put shoes on 10,000 refugees or whatever it is. And so he was kind of feeling down. And not only did I tell him if he wants to do this, he's got 40, 50 years to sit behind a desk and do whatever he wants to do.
Like, that time will come.
Yeah, so he shouldn't be running to the desk job.
Where's my cubicle?
Yeah, I don't think, said no one ever. So, but the other thing I said is, look, you know, we've talked about this before, but you never know who you're going to meet. You have people coming in from all over the country. And you're spending 3 days with each of these crews. They're getting to know you. You've told me you've talked to them about their interest in whatever. And so you don't read your resume out there, but talk about what you like to do. You know, just interact with them on that level anyway. Sure. And so he says, yeah, I do. And a lot of the crews like computers and stuff like that. So he talks to them. Anyway, he called me the other day. He goes, you're not going to believe this. So one of the adult guides, who was a former Air Force chief of navigation or whatever he was. And David was really nervous because that's not his strong suit, navigation. But the guy came over to him in a down moment and said, hey, do you have a second? David's like, sure. And he's thinking, what's wrong? What did I do wrong? What's wrong? The guy goes, you know, you had mentioned what your degree is. He said, you know, I'm retired from the Air Force. I'm actually vice president, and he named this huge chain of restaurants and convenience stores in the West. And he goes, and our graphic design department is kind of lacking. So if you'd like my contact information, I'd love to talk to you about a position.
Oh,
and David
goodness.
said I could not get my phone out fast enough. It was like,
I'm playing it cool.
I'm sure I could fit you in for a conversation. So he was just coming back and talking about that he didn't really, he thought it was just something Dad say. He didn't think it would actually work in the real world. You know, and it reminded me of a couple of things. One other thing, and then I want your reaction. About a month ago, I was talking to a lawyer on the other side of this real estate transaction. I could tell she was just really good at real estate, just knew her stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I did what Elliots do. I looked her up on LinkedIn and her website, and all her website talked about was family law and domestics, and so it had nothing to do with real estate. So the next conversation, I asked her, so why the disconnect? She goes, oh, I do a lot of family law. I hate it. I really like doing real estate, but I just don't have a lot of it. And so we spent the next 20 minutes, and I was basically berating her for not putting out there what she really wants to do and what she's obviously really good at. Not saying she's not good at domestics, but and she felt that she had to have already done it in order to advertise that she wants to do it.
Oh, that's so interesting. That so imagining in her case, I love that sort of second add layer to this, that in her case, that she couldn't put on there that she focuses on real estate because she's thinking of her site as more like a resume of past, like accomplishments or like things you've accumulated already, not a sign for what you want more of as you're doing that shift.
Right. And there's a balance. I mean, if I really want to be an EMT, I'm not going to put out on my resume that I am an EMT when I have no qualification. But she obviously does. It's just not the focus of her practice. But it's kind of that thing that Wayne Gretzky said. You don't skate to where the puck is. You skate to where the puck is going. And that's really what I was saying. Put the things out there. Skate to where you want the puck to go.
Right. Yeah, no, I love that. And also just kind of threading it into, so where my mind was, the whole concept of luck isn't something that happens. It's not like a magic cloud you walk into and then there's luck there. Like a lot of luck just simply has to do with opportunities realizing that they're standing in the same room together, So
Right.
just mentioning the things again, as you said, you're not going to walk around being like, "Hi, I'm interested. Do you have any jobs in this area?" But just making sure that people know that you're interested in a thing. Then, I mean, that's how I ended up. That's how I ended up. I've been singing with the Wafflers now for 7 years, and that only happened because I randomly mentioned in a networking meeting something about singing or missing singing. It wasn't even like I didn't even know the person, but that's kind of the whole point. I didn't know the person across from me was involved in a band or had any musical whatever, but I mentioned it, whatever. And they said, "Oh my gosh, I'm singing in a band." And then a couple years later, they had an opening and he was like, "Do you want to come check this out?" But he wouldn't have even have known that was a thing had I not mentioned it. And so making sure that that people know what you're interested in, especially in that website way. I really love that. I think that's a huge opportunity.
Yeah. I see that all the time that's how ruts get created, I think, in business, because you only dig into out there in the world, and whether it's in social media or networking meetings or personal conversation or marketing materials, you only dig into the stuff that you've already been doing. And you figure, well, it's a chicken egg problem. I want to do this thing, but I'm not going to tell anybody that I want to do this thing until I have done this thing. But you don't get an opportunity to do that thing because you haven't told anybody about your interest in doing that.
Right.
And I see that all the time.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the line is drawn, because a lot of people don't want to get embarrassed. They're afraid that they're going to get a question. Well, how many other clients have you had that you've done this for? Even if they're super competent, they'd be great at it, but they don't have a lot of experience. But they're worried, somebody's going to ask me to read my resume and then it's going to be lacking. Then I'm going to look stupid.
Right.
No,
I definitely think that's part of it. And it's like you said, you don't misrepresent. If like the person that you were talking about, wouldn't put on her website, the nation's leading real estate lawyer, and you don't make up that you have more clients than you have. You have to keep it authentic. But not having it on there, somewhere between that and barely mentioning it or not mentioning it at all, is the sweet spot of putting it out there as just a category of things that you do. At the very least, having it mentioned as an option, and downplaying the things that you don't want to do. In general, I think there's another thread though here that I want to also hit on, is I think the value of how much you enjoy something is wildly overlooked as having value, as being important. And just the fact that she enjoys it more, the fact that it didn't come to mind that her interest is shifting away from this into that, because that happens in business all the time. You build a practice or you build a whole department or whatever, you build something, you're like, oh, I really, really like this. And you do for a while and you're like, and now I'm not as interested in it. And feeling like that is somehow you're stuck there, that you've like, well, I've built this, so now I have to do it forever. No, you just need a transition plan to start putting in more of what you want. And then you can let go of the things that you aren't as interested in. But with David, especially for people building careers or like making career choices, just the whole notion that doing something that I know he cares about as much as what he's doing this summer in any way counts as wasted time. I think it's just such an unfortunate societal view of the world. Yeah, I'm so excited for people. I know a lot of younger folks who are either because of COVID and whatnot, it sort of opened up the space to take gap years or to, accept a thing to a college, but defer it for a year and go away, or to study someplace else or try something different. Because it's so much easier to do that at that time in your life than later. And I just really rail against the notion that any sort of the have-tos when it comes to career, it should be such a sign that it's not that it's not the best thing for you, but I'm really rambling here on this thought, but I'm trying to pull it all together. It's like those breadcrumbs of what has value and interest to you should never be ignored. They should get woven in some way.
No, and I think that one of the things you said, which is incredibly valuable, when I, in teaching at Towson, and I taught 11 semesters, I think. And so you get your evaluations at the end of each semester. And one of the consistent themes that came across in terms of the positive comments was that it's apparent he really loves this. And that's what a lot of the students took, because I do. You love it. And so that was valuable, and that came across. And I started to think about that, and more in proposals on the, when I do courses and things, or when I'm actually talking to a prospective client whose business I think is really interesting and fascinating, or has the kind of work that I'd really like to do. That's what I emphasize, because they come in and they probably know from the website or from whoever referred them, they probably assume that I know what I'm doing in law. So, I don't have to say, well, I graduated.
Jokes on them.
And this is my resume. And,
right.
But what I found incredible value in saying in so many words, this is what I love to do.
Yeah.
Your thing, here's why I think what you're doing is so cool. And this is why I started the firm, or this is one of the things that, we can do this. And whether it's teaching at Towson or working with clients or talking to prospective clients, I found more power in this is what I love to do approach.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's just, I do it all the time. It's just a slogan or whatever. It has to be authentic.
Right.
There may be some people out there who can fake authenticity, but I don't think I'm one of them. But
I hope not. I hope you can't fake authenticity.
Well, there are actors and whatnot. But either way, if you're authentic, I know some of the best business opportunities I've gotten not because my website showed off my resume and whatever. It's because I've actually talked about how much I love to do whatever it is that we're discussing, or what aspects get me excited.
Well, there's a friend of mine that I met through a program I was in named Lissa Boles, and the first time I saw her speak, she said that it was this whole concept of that what you're here to do as an entrepreneur or in the world in general is what you can't not do. And what you just can't hold yourself back from doing, what you're fascinated by, and it's interesting because she talked about the word weird, that its original derivation, and I always forget what it's WYRD. I can't remember if it's Celtic or Gaelic or it's something, some ick. But the original derivation of the word meant like destiny or something like that, that what makes you weird is so key to what you do. And I think a real trap of this is imagining that it has to be like an either or. I was talking to my son last night. He's going away to college in the fall to study mechatronics, which I just love saying. I always want to be like mechatronics. But it's cool. It's a blend of mechanical and electrical engineering and also computer science, since so many things are like all three of those things. And I think it's going to be a cool program. I think he's more than capable of doing it, but he has always had this fascination with serial killers and forensics, not so much forensic science per se, but like forensic psychology, kind of like what makes people tick. And and how you can read body language. And like, there's just that whole, he for fun watches these videos of like the CIA people talking about how they can, read this or figure that out. It's a fascination for him. And I said to him last night, I said, as you're going through, I think the path you're on could be a great career. And just don't ever lose sight of your super deep and long-term interest in all this stuff. And it doesn't mean that he has to dump the mechatronics path necessarily. It may mean that there's some version of a path that involves both. I don't know what that would be exactly, but and not everything blurs together into a nice little Venn diagram. But I do think it's just crazy important to find any way to weave in more of what you want into whatever you're doing and not separate business and pleasure as much as I think people do. In fact, it's really funny. This is really weird because I did not put this here, but I just picked up, and I'm showing you on the camera, a piece of paper that I have from God knows where that I found the other day that says, if you don't mix business and pleasure, there's no time for pleasure. And then I have attributed to startup FBI guy quote. So I have no idea what that is.
Let's get Christy to track that down.
I don't know. I won't even send her on that wild goose chase because I have absolutely no idea what that is. It might have been from the show Startup. I don't know, but
it was. I won't even say my parents' generation because it was the way that I had thought about professional work and just going to work was, hey, 50 weeks out of the year, you do what you have to do. Right. And then you get these 2 weeks to do the stuff you want to do. Mm-hmm. And that's really the dynamic that I think, or the paradigm that has gotten shifted, thankfully, lately, because people have realized that that's just a ridiculous way to do things.
Well, it is. And to be clear, it doesn't mean... I've seen people cut and dice that in a couple different ways. It doesn't have to mean that, your job is your passion. I know some people who have chosen career paths where their job doesn't drain them. It gives them what they need, but it's sort of a bucket and they don't hate it, but it's not. And then they have all this energy and use their time outside of work to do what, like they don't live for their job. It's not their identity. That's just, it serves a purpose. And for other people that just wouldn't work. But, so I think, but finding ways to make it more fun or, I've talked, I don't do career coaching, but I do end up talking to people often about what they want to do with I don't do the part of career coaching that's like how to position yourself with your resume and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But the part about what are you doing with this life that you've been given, is one spins around the sun. That part I really enjoy. And sometimes it's as simple as, if you're if you're an accountant and you can be an accountant in an industry that you find fascinating, it's more fun than if you're an accountant at something that you don't find fascinating.
Well, but the other thing is when you were talking about how you got your, I guess it was audition or what, how you came into contact with what became the Wafflers and went forward. I think that if you're an accountant who likes doing whatever it is, you can still identify your people. You can do things where you start to bring in people who get you as clients. Now, they too may have side businesses and they may not just be water skiing enthusiasts and they became professional water skiers. I mean, that's not always possible. But you do get a chance by putting yourself out there and by putting your interests out there. Even if you don't work directly in them, you get to associate with people who speak your language, who share your level of excitement. There might be different opportunities with that same group of people or expanding that group so that your quality of life increases just by being around your interests as opposed to deciding that they're put on a shelf until you take your 2 weeks or whatever it is.
Yeah. And there's two threads here. And I occasionally in this episode, I've sort of paused because it almost feels like there's two tracks that I want to be hitting on. And I think we're hitting on both of them, but sort of bouncing back and forth. One is this thread of your passion and your interest and the things that light you up and threading those into your work as well. But the other one is not keeping that whole thought process in your head, speaking to it or making it more obvious or seeing to make it possible for serendipity to happen. That when people know a thing about you, or when they know that you're interested in something, it doesn't, again, I think the authenticity is super important. It doesn't mean that then, because if it feels like you're out there fishing for that from someone, fishing for opportunities, it feels gross. But if you're just, to me, it feels like putting your taxicab light on. That's something that's sort of going the way. I don't even, some people might not even know what that means now.
No, I actually like that way of describing it. And in fact, I would ask our listeners to identify what their taxicab light would indicate or would say, or,
Well, thank you for that reminder, because every week from now until our birthday, we are going to draw a name from the people who have either joined the Facebook group or joined our texting community, which I'll tell you how in just a second, for a Starbucks gift card that I'm going to mail out. And this week's card goes to John Gartrell, who is in the texting community. And so, John, I will be messaging with you of how best to get that to you. I think I can send it electronically, but we'll figure that out. Clearly, we plan these things out extremely well.
Don't get too hard on yourself.
Operations team.
Our operations team is on strategic retreat these 2 weeks, so it's not really our fault.
Yeah, so I'll figure it out. But here's to be in the drawing for next week, from now until the grand day of September 1st, when each of us has a birthday. You can either go, if you go to sohere'smystory.com, there are links to both the Facebook page as well as how to text us straight from there. But if you have your handy phone right in your hand, you can also text us directly at 410-632-6894, which unfortunately spells nothing that makes it easier to remember, not even remotely. But so I'll repeat it again in a second. But first, you have to do the second step. That's the one little thing. You text something to us, and then this thing will come back, and you just have to confirm your contact. Otherwise, we never get the first one. So that's 410-632-6894. And if you like Starbucks, get in line.
And so in the meantime, we'll not only figure out in our spare time whether we can send those electronically, but we'll get Christy tracking down that random note from your desk. Just
no.
You know
what? I'm going to try and find. I wouldn't send anyone down that rabbit hole. It's too much of a rabbit hole. I might actually be able to find it. We'll see.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories.
You
can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best of
Lovingly
ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us. Which is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.